Good morning, and welcome to Surrender Life on this wonderful Christmas Eve morning. Just want to welcome you all back. It's good to be with you. Once again, I just want to share with you some thoughts from my biblical studies. I'll start off like I do every week. I'm not a pastor, not a theologian, not a biblical expert. Just kind of want to share with you what I come across in my daily readings and studies and how it touches me. Um, Today, I want to talk about how we sometimes either intentionally or unintentionally box God in. Um, and I don't think a lot of us do this intentionally, but I think when we put expectations on what we ask God for, or we want things to come in a specific way, it we unintentionally box God in. And so I just want to discuss that today, and I want to discuss it through the story of Naaman. Um, So let's get into it. Have you ever felt like God didn't answer your call or provide your needs in the way that you desired or at the time that you needed Him to? Or maybe you felt that how He responded to your call wasn't in the manner you expected. Many of us expect God to respond to our needs in a specific way or manner. And if He responds differently than expected, we may feel that He didn't come through or that He has let us down in some way or another. To physically box someone or something in means to prevent them or it from moving freely. Simply meaning we put things or something in their way to prevent movement and to make it difficult. There are many ways in which we box God in, including a lack of faith and trust. By limiting our expectations of what He can do, we miss His subtle work, focusing on our own understanding or lack of thereof instead of His sovereignty. It's less about God being boxed in or constrained, and is more about us blocking His ability to surpass all understanding and expecting Him to fit our narrow view of miracles or solutions by understanding His nature and character. Setting expectations for Him, being self-centered, or expecting God to fit into a schedule or timeline, rather than acknowledging His nature and trusting His bigger plan, which is always different from ours. I believe that most of us believe that God can work, but we often expect Him to work in a specific way according to our logic and on our timeline. We box God in when we decide how He should act, who He should use, what obedience should look like, and what makes sense according to us. Have you ever believed God would help you, but only in a specific way? Nineveh and the story of Nineveh shows us what happens when human expectations collide with God's divine instruction. Today our guiding scripture, today our guiding scripture comes from 2 King chapter 5 verses 1 through 14. And I know this is a little bit longer than the scriptures I provide, but I wanted to give you the whole story because I think it provides for a power narrative. Now Nineveh was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victories to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Nineveh's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means, go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Nineveh left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, with this letter I am sending my servant Naaman to you, so that you can cure him of his leprosy. As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robe and said, Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me? When Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robe, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elijah's house. Elijah sent a messenger to him to say, Go wash yourselves 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be clean. But Nineveh went away angry and said, I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hands over the spot, and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went off in rage. Nineveh's servant went to him and said, My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would not you have done it? How much more then when he tells you, Wash and be cleansed? So he went down and clipped and dipped in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like a young boy. Just some background here. Nineveh was a powerful commander who was highly respected, successful, wealthy, and influential. But he was also deeply broken because he had leprosy. And just for context, leprosy, much like AIDS today, was one of the most feared diseases of the time. Some forms were extremely contagious and sometimes incurable. In its worst forms, it led to death. Nineveh did not come to God desperate because he had and needed to be cured of leprosy. He came entitled. As commander of the army of the king of Aram, he was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded. He was a valiant soldier. Nineveh went to his master, who told him, By all means, go, and I will send a letter. He expected healing on his terms. And the verse says he left, taking with him talents of silver and gold and clothing, and a letter from his king. His expectation was because he was because he was influential, wealthy, and had a recommendation from the king that he would be healed of his leprosy. And I think the important thing to note here is that sometimes our success, our status, and our self-confidence make it harder for God to trust God fully. How does he box God in? Nineveh expected God to work a certain way. Due to his success, his status, wealth, and endorsement by the king, he went to the king of Israel instead of the prophet as the young girl from Israel has instructed. But the king of Israel read the letter. He immediately tore his robe and said, Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me? The king of Israel knew the request to heal Nineveh's leprosy was an impossible demand, and he thought it was a trap to provoke him into conflict because he couldn't perform the miracles, and he believed he was being challenged to kill and make alive again like a god. However, Elijah, the man of God, whom the young girl instructed Nineveh to seek, asked, Why have you torn your robes? Have him come to me, and he will know there is a prophet in Israel. When Nineveh arrived at Elijah's house, Elijah sent a messenger to him saying, "Go wash yourselves 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." Nineveh went away angry because he thought that Elijah would come out, stand and call on the name of the Lord, and perform some miracle over the spots of his leprosy, and he would be cured. When God doesn't move the way we expect, we often interpret it as a rejection instead of instruction. We have to understand that God uses whom he pleases. The young girl from Israel knew it was the prophet, not the king, who could heal Nineveh. And Elijah sent a message to deliver the instructions for healing instead of doing it himself. However, Nineveh expected the prophet to come out personally to perform a dramatic prayer and to personally use a public display of power in healing him. So when God didn't meet those expectations, Nineveh became angry. He also questioned God's method. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, far better than the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleaned? To him, the instructions felt illogical and beneath him. We have to understand that when God uses unexpected people, or we feel there is someone more suited for the role or situations, or we can't understand God's guidance, what do we do? How do unmet expectations sometimes cause frustration with God? We have to understand that God's instructions often offend human logic and pride. As in this story, God was not testing the waters, he was testing Nineveh's obedience. So I want to ask, have you ever dismissed God's instructions because they just didn't make sense to you? Have you called on God and asked for an answer, and the answer you received was not what it thought you was, what it thought you should be, so you went another direction? Nineveh wanted healing, but he didn't want to exercise humility, submission, or dependence. He wanted God's power without surrendering control. Due to his status, stature, wealth, and recommendation from his king, he expected to be healed on his terms. It is pretty ironic that it took the words of his servants, people who were beneath him socially, to redirect him. Nineveh's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would not you have done it? How much more when he tells you, wash and be cleansed?" Why is pride often the biggest obstacle to obedience? Sometimes God uses unexpected voices, such as the young Israeli girl, Elijah's messenger, and Nineveh's own servants, to challenge our pride and realign our faith. Finally, Nineveh obeyed. So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored, and he became clean like a young boy. He went down exhibiting humility. He followed the messenger's instructions exactly, and he stopped arguing and started obeying. Only after obedience was he healed. We have to understand that God's power is not released by understanding everything, but by trusting fully in him. So what does this mean for us? Nineveh's expectations boxed God in by creating a rigid, pride-fueled formula for healing. He expected Elijah to personally perform a grand, dramatic ritual, showing him special respect due to his status, rather than obeying simple instructions, which almost cost him his blessing, because God's methods seemed beneath him and lacked the pageantry Nineveh envisioned. He had a preconceived notion of how a great prophet should act and how a powerful man should be healed. which clash with God's simple, humble path to restoration. This story highlights how pride, assumptions, and expectations limit God's ability to work in unexpected ways. We box God in when we say, God can help, but only in this way. When we partially obey or demand explanation before obedience, or allow our pride to override our trust. We have to understand that faith in God is not controlling God, it's submitting to Him. Once again, I thank you all for tuning in. I hope you have a Merry Christmas holiday. Enjoy your holiday with your family, but please don't forget the reason for the season. This is the day that God sent His Son to start the great news being spread over the world. So have a great holiday, and we'll see you next time. May God continue to bless you.